I happen to like Yetis myself, but maybe in a different variation than you are talking.
You like both the drinkware and the creature, so
Also true.
they are pretty cool. Actually, Brad, can you bring me the new one from Smile Doctors?
Yeah, I'll throw it up.
Shout out to Smile Doctors, I guess.
I
Sponsor
mean,
us.
we don't have paid endorsements, but if we did, we would go with Smile Doctors and
Well,
the North
yeah.
American Wood Ape Conservancy. Oh, I like that one. That's at the big
So I
tumbler.
got this one, and it says, oh, and this one's massive.
Here first. Here for the
Well,
smiles.
this one was an employee appreciation gift from Smile Doctors, and then this is one that we're using for
That one's
Brad.
really cool.
And I love the color of this one. But this is 20 ounces or 24 ounces. So imagine how big this damn thing is. It's like 50 ounces of water.
It's pretty
If you drink that in coffee, do you see heaven?
I suspect it's 40 ounces, by the way. I suspect so.
I feel like you got to start flying.
You probably start flying, yeah.
Yeah. If that's your wine mom mug, then
Your
uh,
wine walk mug, you're fucked.
you're singing under the table. Uh,
Drinking a beer stein of.
Oh yeah, we did trivia at our apartment, as you know. And the trivia lady was drinking a beer stein full of wine while she was reading off the questions. By the end, she was like, "Yeah, I think I'm a little drunk." Like, really?
I was next to the
You're
guy.
on your second beer stein of wine?
I was next to the guy pouring it. He's like, "Whoops."
oh boy.
Brad, are you joining the podcast today? Or are you just walking around?
We're playing with the cats in the background. All right, so we're supposed to be talking about St. Augustine, Florida for October.
Which is one of the scariest places in the world.
Yeah,
Anyway.
and any town that has a dedicated website that says the most haunted places in St. Augustine, and it's got more than 2 editions to it, you do sit there and go like, hey, that's a thing. But here's the thing. First of all, I got nothing. Like, I can't even talk about skunk apes in Florida in St. Augustine because they would stand out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
Although they might actually just look like one of those hairy guys downtown who's, maybe taking a little too much Thorazine or something along those lines. But there is so much in St. Augustine, and our family took a vacation to Florida, Palm Coast area a number of years ago. I forget exactly what year. I guess it was probably 2013 or so.
I think this was 2013, this one. Well, we went
And
to
we ended up going to St. Augustine and walking around the town. I mean, first of all, it's a quaint little town. It's really quite it's not really a little town, it's a city, but it's filled with that weird rock that I never quite understand exactly what it is. The closest I've come to an understanding of it is basalt rock, where it's just like
I think it's basalt. I think there's
millions and
nothing.
millions of tiny crustaceans and coral crushed together. Um, and and so the town is comprised of dead living animals. Let's just start there and go forward. But the thing I remember most is going up out of, we had parked, and I think we were parked near that little park, and then we walked up and we kind of visited all those little uh, uh, shops and stuff down in that area before heading off to the Castillo de San Marcos. My Spanish is spectacular.
So
and
good.
and the thing that I remember most is walking up, and the first like stall on one of the little streets was a ghost tour place.
Mhm.
And then the next 3 stalls were also ghost tour spaces. And then when we got to the place where the wine shop was with the wines that I couldn't afford, across the street from that was actually a vampire tour place. And so you're sitting there going, all right, you have enough haunted crap in your town, or at least legends of haunted crap in your town,
To support
that
a street of ghost stores.
right. And the only other place that I can think of that had that many ghost tours that I personally had visited was London, where you couldn't walk for 10 feet without running into a ghost tour, which your mother and I actually did a ghost tour in London. It was super fun until the guy decided to do bad magic tricks. And I decided that I wasn't going to let them work on me, because one of the ones that he did was this whole heat sensation thing where he put foil in your hand and it's supposed to heat up. And I just looked at him and I said, "And what's happening?" And he was like, "Oh, crap."
Oh no.
So anyways, here is the current listing of haunted crap in St. Augustine as put out by the most haunted places in St. Augustine. I do
Is this
like
the weird HTML looking website? Because I looked at this one earlier.
Yeah, it's the one that starts off with St. Augustine is no stranger to ghost sightings, haunted houses, and creepy spine-chilling Halloween year-round levels of spookiness. As the oldest city in the United States, might also be the most haunted. And so they got Flagler College, Don Pedro Horutiner House. I don't know. George Street. Don Pedro built in the early 1600s. The Tolomato Cemetery, it sounds like a tomato. Who would like the Tolomato Cemetery, please? The Huguenot Cemetery, Scarlett O'Hara's, which is a popular bar and restaurant for locals and tourists alike, and it's reportedly haunted by the ghost of Mr. Coley. And if I remember right, that was actually on America's Most Haunted Bars or something, one of those like TLC shows. The St. Augustine Lighthouse, because you can't have a lighthouse anywhere on the eastern coast of the United States without it being more haunted than haunted could be. The St. Francis Inn, the old jail, which we've actually been to.
Remember that?
The Segway Kirby Smith House, which is a Confederate general. That's the one that I think we'll talk about that in a little bit. Castillo de San Marco, which we already mentioned, the old fort that was built in 1565. That's on my no place. And then ghost tours. So here's the listing.
The Fay House too. There is a house. It's a relatively new haunting. It's on Kane Street. No, not Kane Street, but it's a CA name. But it actually is a woman who died in the 1970s, and I guess she was just a bit of a like asshole. And she fell down her stairs and broke her neck after she went to yell at somebody. Nobody noticed for like 5 days. And now it's actually a British pub now. And we actually walked by it when we went. And apparently there's like a ton of pictures of like her standing in the windows, and like it was a stop on the ghost tours for a while, but then the current owners decided that they didn't want it to be a part of the ghost tours anymore, which is why it's not on that website.
Well, here's the listing of recommended ghost tours from localinns.com. All right. The Ancient City Tours, which takes you deep into the bowels of San Marcos Castillo, the castle. Ghost Augustine, so go St. Augustine. So Ghost Augustine. Ripley's Haunted Castle Tour. A Night Among Ghosts. The Sheriff's Ghost Walk. The Ghosts and Gravestones of Fright Seeing Tour.
Maybe.
The Old Ghost Walking Tour. Okay, now that one is you do it yourself. Here's your map. Good luck, and we'll see you in the morning, maybe. Kind of thing. The Spanish Military Hospital Museum Tour and the Medieval Torture Museum.
Thank you.
So I do want to hit the old jail for a moment, which is located at 167 St. Marcos Avenue. And the old jail was home to incarcerated prisoners for 60 years. 8 prisoners were executed on the gallows located behind the building. The prison is said to be haunted by an inmate, Charlie Powell, who reportedly died a particularly slow death on the gallows. Now, that one is one of the places that we actually stopped when we were walking down San Marco Avenue. And I distinctly remember going in and, talking to those people that we were traveling with at the time and saying, those are boots. And thinking, yeah, those are boots. And we're all wearing flip-flops and sneakers, but those are boots. And I can remember a particular tall, slightly balding guy that we were traveling with at the time, saying,
I'm
you know,
reading that when I visit them.
you know, you don't think that this place is haunted, do you? And me going, yep. Yeah, I mean, it was a place that I mean, they literally executed people there, and you got to, you know, set the scene for executions at that time. I mean, first of all, it wasn't like when they dropped you through the gallows; it was, you know, a particularly wonderful death for you. The hope was that your body weight would drag you down, and instead of choking to death, it would snap your neck. But it didn't always work that way. And apparently, this ghost is one of the people who died, but he died by hanging versus really meaning choking, you know,
Asphyxiation.
asphyxiation,
Yeah.
as opposed to the broken neck thing. And so it is in fact a place that I would put down and say is 100%, you know, frozen. I mean, not frozen. What the hell was that? It's haunted.
I thought you were going with like Frozen in Time, or I don't know. I don't know where you're going with that, but
I don't know either.
I was gonna go along with it.
You know, yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those things where you definitely go and say, hey, that's a thing. So
Yep.
that
You're so right.
and I want to see about Scarlett O'Hara's.
As a side note, I am so scared of St. Augustine. I literally will not step a foot in the city. Like, the closest I am willing to get to St. Augustine is, in fact, Cinnamon Beach.
Yeah.
That's as close as I'll go. I'm not a fan of the place. I mean, after we visited in 2013, I had nightmares for years about that place, that I was being chased around by this like headless guy with an axe. Yeah, like he was coming up out of this like square staircase that went underground, and like you could kind of like look over the wall of the staircase, and you could see him walking up, and it was, oh yeah, I don't like that place. Did you know it had ties to the Fountain of Youth or Fountain of Life, whatever it's actually called?
Oh yeah. Castillo De San Marcos is, well, yeah, I guess reality is the entirety of St. Augustine is supposedly where Ponce de Leon found the Fountain of Youth or Fountain of Life, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Now, whether or not there's any
That's
truth,
true.
I mean, it's sort of like the rusted well in England. You know, there's just this well in I don't know if it's in Avon. Your mother and I went to it, but anyways, we went on one of those tours, and it supposedly it's called the Bloody Well, and because the high ferrous content of the water makes it appear like there's blood coming out of the bricking. But the reality is it's just high ferrous content, right? But there are a lot of people who attribute the Chalice Well as having, you know, restorative powers and, you know, whatever. So anyways,
Right. And there's a lot of myths surrounding it, like being located somewhere in St. Augustine. But there's no definitive like place that they say like, oh, this is where it supposedly is. Like they say it's like under the city. I think that's super interesting because I've been saying it for years. I think there's something weird about the city. Like, never mind all of the hauntings. I think there's just something like extra strange about that place. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it could possibly be, but I don't think I really want to know either. Like, that city really did freak me out, like very few other places have.
well, let me tell you about O'Hara's, because We didn't go to it.
Good.
And part of it was because it's a bar. But first of all, it was built in 1870 as a private residence. The owner was murdered in his own bathtub.
Rude.
Rude. And it is, quote unquote, allegedly haunted. Now, why do they say that? Is it haunted? It is known as a ghost bar. All right. The upstairs
Okay.
pub is aptly named for the restaurant's residing specter. This apparition is so beloved that the establishment hangs a stocking for Christmas.
Well, at least he's an included ghost.
And apparently he's a playful poltergeist. So it is a not a poltergeist situation, it is a haunting, kind of like your grandmother's house haunting. All right. It is not a wayward spirit passing through. It is something that's been there. So built in 1870, George Coley, I assume that, or Cole, I don't know which. I'll go with Cole. Cole sounds easier to pronounce. Commissioned the establishment for his fiancée. He was infatuated with a whimsically doting woman who was his soon-to-be bride. The residence was her wedding gift. Yet George discovered that Marina had forsaken him for another man, a soldier stationed at Fort Marion. It was a sordid affair, scandalizing St. Augustine.
Oh
George
my goodness.
then met a woman soon after that. So I guess George wasn't like sitting there pining in the fields, was he?
No, he was not.
Though their affections were short-lived, he showered her with the spoils of marriage, moved her into the house on Hippolyta Street. Yet, without warning, George was found lifeless in his bathtub.
She was probably a witch.
Foul play was expected, not anticipated, not they thought, accused. It was expected. And George's death was sensationalized, though some thought that first his fiancée was involved in his untimely end, they lacked any evidence. Others suggested suicide, though this too was quite unlikely. Now, this is because one does not stab oneself several times.
No, there's normally a limit on that.
You know? And so victims of premature death seem to often linger near locations that they loved. Murder victims are particularly prominent for poltergeist sightings. So the hauntings begin. Guests at the bar have heard sounds of splashing water and low groans. Probably the groan saying, "Stop stabbing me, bitch." All right. Those sensitive to spiritual energies believe that George is playing a monologue of his last moments alive. Help, help. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Okay. So this is the thing. George is not alone on the property. This is kind of like this reminds me so much of your grandmother's house, right? So like, oh, they have the ghost table. If you just take the ghost table out to the garage, then the garage would be haunted. No, that's not how this works, right?
No.
So George is not the only poltergeist to be known on the property. Another male presence has been spotted. Now, notice they're not saying felt. They're like, oh, that's a dead dude, and he's walking. Okay, he pulls out bar stools, sits, and then vanishes.
Kind of him. Does he tuck him in at least?
Is this specter looking to order spirits?
Ah ha ha.
All right.
That reminds me of something in New Orleans. Apparently, the taxi cabs had to put a limit on when they could pick up people because they had too many ghosts get in the car and vanish before they could be paid. And I think that's too fucking funny.
Beep. Yeah, that's a little out there.
Anyway,
so one of the things, it was first built for George and Marina and his capricious wife to be who abandoned him, right? But the other thing is apparently it was built and established 14 years after the War of the Confederacy, the Civil War. And, one of the things that people wonder is, was it built in a place where Confederate soldiers may have engaged Union soldiers in fighting? And since you're talking about St. Augustine, Florida, an area that had significant amount of Civil War, fighting, the answer is probably.
Is that most likely?
And so there's the question of that. It's relative nearness to the old prison in San Marcos as well, on San Marcos Street as well. And frankly, the people who do these sorts of investigations for a living or whatever, or a dying, One of the things that they definitely have looked at is, does like attract like? So if you have a place that's predisposed to spiritual energies, is it going to draw in? And there's
Probably.
I mean, there's like Ghostbusters theme going on with that, in the sense of like they have the the building that was built by this Udor Zander guy, or whatever his name was, some supposed Satanist in the 1920s in the movie Ghostbusters. And of course he built it out of this particular um, metal that supposedly channels residual energies and everything. And so that's why the entire universe of Ghostbusters was born. But there's a basic theory that revolves around that. And it's not lost on me that the primary building block of St. Augustine is that weird shellfish and coral rock, the basalt sort of stuff.
Right.
Because there's also another famous site in Florida that's completely built out of that kind of rock. And I mean, it was actually an episode of the television program In Search of in the 70s. And it was because the guy who built it's kind of a mansion / castle sort of thing. He built it entirely out of this material by himself.
Oh, good.
And he built it by himself using very rudimentary tools, things like tripod lifts. And supposedly people had seen him moving these huge blocks of basalt around by himself using just two hands, and just like kind of moving it. And there has been those people, who are heavy into the paranormal world, have actually had, tried to do experiments with it to see if there's a particular, energy from the earth that flows more naturally through basalt. Sort of like, and I can't help but draw the analogy of like, when you look at potatoes, the potato is not the first thing you think of, that if you take a potato, lime juice, and a little bit of wire and a light bulb, and you can turn the light bulb on. Potato
True.
batteries are not things that you would think of, because it's a potato.
Right.
But is there something natural that is drawing the huge amount of ghost tours, that are there? Because if there are actually ghosts in St. Augustine, and I'm going to go with yes, I do think so. And by the way, just finishing up with O'Hara's, think about it, it is a off-kilter property to begin with. Like the way that it was built was designed bizarre. They call it Beach Shack Victorian, or Jimmy Buffett's, I love this, is my favorite line, Jimmy Buffett's Inception style fever dream.
Of course, because that's naturally what you think of when you build a house.
Right. And then, by the way, George Cole, of course, passed away shortly after moving in there. And by passed away, he was passed away.
I'd say
right?
He was forcibly passed away, but yes.
Okay. And his relatives, though, inhabited that building until 1955, at which point it was then boarded up for 20 years. And then when it opened, it was, operates as a restaurant, specialized in Southern cuisine. However, the bar has had so many problems, the upstairs bar, with plates, knives, utensils, and particularly spirits, meaning the liquor, being moved around. And in often cases, when it seems like George, or the other guy who doesn't but does live there, gets angry if you sit in his special spot, he starts knocking the shit off of the bar, that they've actually started putting like things up. The ghost bar is behind specialty ropes, because then he can't push it forward off of. So, and now if it flies, it gets loose, if he flings it, I guess. But yeah, I mean, not,
Well, what happened to his new fiance or wife after he was murdered?
I think she continued to live in there, and then his offspring. So it kind of sounds like he must have had a kid at some point. But anyways, yeah. So that is the ghost bar. It's one of the haunted places we didn't actually go to while we were in St. Augustine. I would actually go back and do a ghost tour now. I mean, we did the ghost tour in Frederick, and that was kind of fun. So, my problem with the ghost tours is most often you're not going to see anything. And in this case, I would say better than 50% chance of having something weird happen.
if we're involved in it, it'll be,
Higher
practically
than.
guaranteed.
All right. So what you got?
I did do something with the Castillo over there, a castle fort
Mhm.
situation. Because of course there's a ton of things going on. It was built, it's a military fort. It was built in 1672. And it hosts a couple of different spirits apparently. There was a tale of two lovers, both whom betrayed the trust of one man. And they got killed. That's pretty much how that tale goes. So visitors report smelling a particularly strong perfume with no distinguishable source, and they found a secret room in the dungeon.
Okay.
Where the skeleton had that housed two skeletons. That's kind of where the tale started. There's still a lot that's not particularly known of the story itself. But you primarily smell the perfume in the dungeon, which admittedly is a bit of a weird place to smell some perfume. And the guy who killed them, you hear in the upper floors, I guess, is what's going on here. I'm still scared of this city. I didn't want to do too in depth because I'm afraid. They scare me.
Mhm.
But I guess this whole thing happened in 1763. It was the end of the 7 Years' War. And it was right after the Spanish had lost control of St. Augustine. So it looks like, yeah. So the wife was married to a Spanish colonel. Is that how you say that? And when the Spanish had lost control of the fort, I think it was a British guy. I can't tell by the name, and the article doesn't specialize, or it doesn't specify. I'm pretty certain he's a British guy. But he comes to live in the fort, and the colonel was significantly older than his wife. The wife's name was Dolores. And she took a liking to this captain who came from England. The colonel obviously was not too pleased about this. Killed them both. And the way he found out about the whole affair was, I guess the colonel had smelled the perfume because she wore a very, very specific perfume, and he had smelled it on the British captain, and took them to the secret room in the dungeon, which I'm still afraid of, and killed them, and then lied about it for like years because they were in a secret room. Nobody knew about it. Nobody found the bodies. So this guy was just saying that his wife had been ill and was sent to Mexico to recover. And the young captain was sent on a special mission to Cuba. That was the cover up.
Oh, okay.
So interesting. Love that. I tried to find out a little bit more about the secret chamber. It doesn't really say much, which is kind of upsetting. I really wanted them to have more information on it. But yeah, so that was pleasant. Funnily enough, they run this particular tour a lot around Valentine's Day.
Love that for them.
Yeah.
I need to make a correction. I fact checked myself in real time.
Yeah.
So basalt is not what this is actually called. It's called coquina. All right. It's a sedimentary rock that is composed either wholly or almost entirely of transported, abraded, and mechanically sorted fragments of shells of mollusks and other little invertebrates. Okay. And it comes from the word cockle or coquina, Spanish word for cockle or shellfish. But this is why I wanted to fact check myself and do this right now in the 7 minutes remaining. Listen to where you can find this stuff. These are the only places. Australia,
of course,
Brazil,
naturally,
Florida,
okay,
Mexico, and North Carolina. Now, I'm taking North Carolina out of it because coquina is very limited distribution in southeastern North Carolina. It is in some places that have some very interesting spiritual things. In Mexico, the coquina is one of the stones that primarily built the temples. Okay. And Brazil, it largely holds oil deposits, which is kind of interesting in and of itself, in shallow oxygenated water. But in Florida, guess what? Washington Oaks Gardens,
Oh, I don't like that place. No, I don't.
which
I
we've
don't
been
like
to.
that place. No, I don't like that place. That place is a very scary tree.
Yes, also true. Almost all of St. John's County, something called the Anastasia Formation on Anastasia Island, which I believe we've at least seen. And then the place that has it the most outside of those places, St. Augustine. And in fact, the Castillo De San Marco is in fact almost 95% made out of coquina. I'm just saying. I think there's a correlation.
I don't really understand why this, like, you know, Rhode Island's haunted, Connecticut's haunted, Graham's house was haunted. Those places don't scare me as much as St. Augustine does. St. Augustine, there's something, like, I'm telling you, there's something there that is not just your typical ghost. And
well, you know,
I don't know if it's asleep. I don't know if it, like, I don't know. Like, I'm telling you, there's something beneath that city that is just rotten. Like,
well,
it is
what
terrifying.
if the Fountain of Youth, which is supposedly nearby, you know, isn't the nice, wonderful thing that has made its way into the fairy tales? You know,
mean
because
a la Pirates of the Caribbean, where you have to steal the life of another to gain the years they would have lived?
well, that
Interesting
wasn't
theory.
quite what I was thinking, but I'm looking at the timeline of the significant events at the Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park property. That dates back to 2400 BC. All right, Native Americans, now known today as the Timucua, begin to occupy the region that spreads to the present-day Central Florida. The Timucua, loosely knit confederation of tribes that shared a common language, but were not bound politically as a common people. They would trade and war against each other.
Okay.
1513, Ponce de Leon comes to shore at Timucua Village, or at a Timucua Village, I can't say it's a the, right, safely in a small harbor in the Atlantic Ocean, believing the area to be an island. He so named the land Beautiful New Land La Florida, because it's known, it was set at the Festival of Flowers. The village of Saloy was centered here at the Fountain of Youth and extended. Now, you know, they go on from 1565, 1587, the first Catholic mission was finally present day United States was established on the site. The Catholic mission system would grow from there. All right. And then it's just a bunch of purchases. A cross made of coquina, 15 stones long and 13 stones wide, is unearthed in 1874. But it was looked like it had to have been built somewhere between 1513 and 1565 or earlier. All right. I'm saying you are correct. There's something going on there. I think it's attached to the stones, to be quite honest. Here's a good one. In 1934, work crew finds human bones while digging on the Fountain of Youth property. Excavate 90 Native American remains. A significant find due to the fact that these were the earliest known remains of a Christian burial of indigenous peoples. And then they find more. I want to look into this one from 1951. Yeah, I do. I agree with you.
There's something, I don't know, like, there's something weird there. I don't trust it. I don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, it is a weird city. You know, I also would say that it sounds like it was somewhat of a central area for thousands of years, you know, and I think when we go on to New Orleans, we're going to find the same thing. Is it's a weird city, but its weirdness has been weird for hundreds of years. You're not talking about something that happened,
Right.
you know, like you know, in the 1940s or the 1950s. You're talking about something that dates back thousands of years.
Right.
And even the native people were like, this place screwed up, you know. Yeah, sorry for the cultural appropriation left in that one.
That was something, Dad.
You
Glad you did
know,
that.
the reality is there's something going on in the city. And I think, I mean, we're coming up on a hard stop in just a minute, quite literally. But the reality is I think you could actually spend multiple episodes just on this one city. I know, Paranormal Tours have gone there. I know that I think Jack Osborne's paranormal show, very cute, has gone there, and I'm pretty sure that Taps has gone there too. So, when you start having multiple groupings go to that place and every one of them coming out going, yeah. Actually, I think Josh Gates did an episode on Expedition Unknown there too.
Yes.
So I'm just saying it's weird. So where are we going next? Because the big one is going to definitely be Salem. I mean, I think you just have to.
And there, did we want to do the Cliff Cities then next in New Mexico?
Sure. Sure.
But don't forget, we have our filming of our guest on October 9th.
October 9th. I thought it was the 10th, but okay.
The Tuesday, whatever the Tuesday is.
All right, good. I'll be back from Seattle by then.
I hope so.
Yeah, we come back that day. All right, excellent. Well, we have less than a minute, so we will say, see, this is what happens when Alex doesn't come in and film, is he doesn't keep us on track. So he was missed this week.
He's right over there.
He's giving me a dirty look. I think he's doing his hair. I'm not sure. All right. Bye.